We are going to step up our equation solving skills a bit in this video, taking a look at two-step equations. So as you would imagine by the name of this type of equation compared to a one-step equation, this takes a little bit more effort to solve, but as long as we keep in mind the same ideas as we learned for this one-step equation video, we should definitely be in good shape. Let's actually start with a word problem. So although this video will focus mainly on the act of just solving equation, it is important that we understand where two-step equations show up in the real world. If they aren't useful after all, why would we learn it anyway? So we're going to use YouTube in this scenario, since I know some of you want to be live streamers one day, or at least you use YouTube fairly frequently. Within YouTube, there are a lot of analytics. And analytics are basically a term, or analytics is a term, that deals with a ton of numbers and statistics that determine how popular and profitable your channel is. So you want to break down these numbers in order to get to a certain amount of subscribers. So you pose this question to yourself. I just started my YouTube channel and already have 10 subscribers after the first day. I want to get to 250 subscribers within the next 6 days. On average, how many subscribers will I need to add per day in order to reach my goal of 250 subscribers? Now, this question leads to an equation in the form of 10 plus 6x equals 250. In this equation, the constant of 10 represents your starting point. The coefficient of 6 represents the number of days. X is the number of new subscribers you need per each of the 6 days. And 250 represents your total or your end goal. So we're going to translate this real world problem into a mathematical equation. We've already done that, right? We're able to do that. Because math is awesome, of course. Now, this equation is in the form of a two-step equation. In a two-step equation, you generally, but not always, have a constant and a coefficient on one side of the equation, and another constant on the opposite side of the equation by itself. Now let's talk about solving. In this equation, our goal is to still isolate our variable, just like it was in our one-step equation video. In this case though, there are two values on the same side of the variable rather than just one. Therefore, we have to get rid of both the 10 and the 6. Generally, I like to work furthest away from my variable and slowly move towards it. Meaning in this case, I'm going to focus on getting rid of the 10 first, since it is further away from x. Once I've gotten rid of the 10, I can focus on getting rid of the 6. Remember, eliminate furthest away and then move closer. To get rid of the 10, we want to do the opposite to ultimately get the value of 10 to 0. Subtracting 10 or adding a negative 10, remember those are the same thing, will accomplish this. Remember to do the same move to the right side of the equation as well to keep that balance. So we are left with 6x equals 240. And just like that, we're already at a basic one-step equation, which you guys are already experts at solving at this point since you're on this video. The 6 is a coefficient, which is being multiplied to x. And since the inverse of multiplication is division, I'm going to divide both sides of this equation by 6. This will lead to having one x on the left side, which is great because now I've isolated x, and it will lead to 40 on the right side of my equation. Our solution then is x equals 40, which means you need an average of 40 new subscribers a day for the next 6 days in order to end your first week with 250 subscribers. Now, we are always going to show commitment to quality by plugging our answer back into the original equation and evaluating to make sure our solution is correct. In this case, 10 plus 6 times 40 should equal 250 if we solve our equation correctly. Now remember order of operations when checking our answer, so we want to multiply the 6 and the 40 before adding 10. 6 times 40 is 240, and then adding 10 gets 250. So because 250 is indeed equal to 250, we know we found the correct solution. So we've established a real-world situation where solving equations can be an important tool. But without the ability to solve these equations consistently, we're going to run into a ton of problems, particularly as equations continue to get more complicated. So let's continue to practice by looking at another two-step equation. Here we have 40 equals negative 11b plus 7. Don't let the fact that the variable is on the right side of this equation trip you up at all. Your goal is still to isolate the variable, regardless of whether it's on the right or left side of the equation. For this one, I want to focus on getting rid of the 7 first. Remember, the negative 11 is attached to b as a coefficient, and you want to work from further away from the variable to closer when you are trying to isolate the variable in an equation. To get rid of the 7, I can either subtract 7 from both sides or add a negative 7 to both sides. This results in an equation of 33 equals negative 11b. Once again, we are now at a very basic one-step equation where negative 11 is a coefficient. Now this negative 11 is being multiplied to b, not subtracted. This means negative 11 times b, remember it's a coefficient. Therefore, we have to divide both sides of our equation by negative 11. We are now left with negative 3 equals b. But we are not done until we check that our answer is correct. That is the true beauty of solving an equation. You can always know whether or not you did a problem correctly, so take the time to do that every single time. When I evaluate for b equals negative 3, I get 40 equals negative 11 times negative 3 plus 7. Remember, negative times the negative gets a positive. I'm also going to do the multiplication before I add, order of operations, right? So negative 11 times a negative 3 gets 33, and then 33 plus 7 is 40, and 40 certainly equals 40, so we solve our equation correctly. Now I'm going to give you a third and final example before encouraging guys to consult your flowchart and practice some independently. Remember guys, practice is key, and this week there's going to be a lot of opportunities for some gift cards of your guys' choosing for the winners. So practice, practice, practice. I can see what you guys are doing, and the more you practice, the more likely you are to qualify for a reward. This equation is the first one that has parentheses, but you have seen this before, so don't let this overwhelm you. What's also nice is you can solve this equation in a lot of equations generally in multiple ways. So this one we're actually going to solve in 2 different ways. Now, first of all, we can use the distributive property. We covered this a lot in week 1 and prior to this summer course. So when I distribute the negative 7 to z and negative 3, I end up with 42 equals negative 7z plus 21. Now this equation looks like a basic 2-step equation like we've been working with in the previous 2 examples. From here, you would solve this equation exactly the same way as we did the previous examples. It's kind of like we just did an extra step of that distribution, so maybe you can look at it as a 3-step equation if you want to. But I'm going to get rid of the 21 by subtracting or adding negative 21 to both sides. Then I will divide out the coefficient of negative 7, and that leaves me at z equals negative 3. Of course, I'm going to evaluate at z equals negative 3 to ensure my solution is correct. In this case, you can see that I end up with a true equation of 42 equals 42 when I check my work. Therefore, z equals negative 3 is indeed the correct solution. But let's look at it another way. This negative 7 is being multiplied to every other term on the right side of the equation, right? We just kind of covered that when we distributed. So instead of multiplying it through distribution, I can actually undo that multiplication by dividing, because the opposite or the inverse of that multiplication is division. By dividing both sides of the equation by negative 7, we end up with negative 6 equals z minus 3, or z and a negative 3. Now we are left with a basic 1-step equation again after that first step of dividing out that negative 7. We would add 3 here to get rid of the negative 3, or the subtraction of 3. This leaves us with negative 3 equals z, which we already checked, so we know this is the correct answer. So that was a really cool thing, right? Either way you solve this equation, it led us to z being negative 3. So basically your role is to decide which one you're more comfortable with and roll with it, but also understand at the same time it can be solved both ways. Now it is time for you guys, this is the most important part, to branch off and try some practice problems on your own. There are Khan Academy problems, there are quizzes, assignments, there are Google Doc worksheets, there's Imagine Math for those of you who feel like you don't need any more practice specifically on this. available to help you hone in your skills. There are also going to be additional videos coming out later in the week to help you, but try all or some of these. Your goal, remember, is to master and understand the content. So it is your responsibility to keep working hard until you get to the point where you fully understand and you can explain this to your little sibling, mom or dad if they're not sure, uncle, aunt, whoever who needs a refresher on their math skills, because math is incredibly important. Now go out there and slay those equations.